Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to the Creative Christmas Collab with me, your host, Teresa from Teresa's Spot for Art, where I love sharing art from my heart and teaching you how to create a little joy in your life through some fun, simple, and quick art projects. We have a bunch of creative friends with us in the playlist. The description is below. The playlist is below in the description. And maybe you can give me a subscribe, and then you can check out the rest of the playlist and give them a subscribe as well. Thank you guys for being here. I'm going to turn you around and we are going to get started. So I have 11 by 14 canvas. You have a tracer, which will allow you to do an 8 by 10 or a 9 by 12, and you could probably do an 11 by 14. You might have to make it a little bigger. This is the tracer that you have access to. This is a design inspired by Tracie Keirnan, and we're doing this little Christmas gnome here. You can also find that tracer and the supply list in the description. I have out a little true blue. It's a little bit of a darker blue and some white. For my background, I'm going to be using a mop brush. You can use a mop brush. You can use a large flat brush for this if you want. You can use an art sponge. When you use an art sponge, you want to dampen it, not wet it, not soak it, not squish it into water, but you just want to dampen it a little bit. But the reason we're using a mop brush or the sponge is because we want a little bit of a swirly, soft background effect. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to just tap my mop brush into the white paint. And then I'm going to tap some of it into the blue paint. And I'm just going to pick a spot, and it doesn't matter where you start, and I'm going to start swirling in. We want the top of our canvas to be darker, and we want our paint to get lighter as we go down. We're going to pick up blue and white every time we go back to our palette. And I'm just making these circular motions. Sometimes I go clockwise, sometimes I go counterclockwise, sometimes I make it a little bigger, sometimes I make it a little smaller. Both colors again. And I'm just going to work my way down the canvas. You want your paint to be wet, so you don't really want to run out of paint on your brush. If it starts not moving, you need more paint, and go back to your palette and pick up more paint. And I'm literally going clockwise, and then counterclockwise. And I'm going to work my way all the way down to the bottom. This time I have my brush is dirty already from the blue, but I'm just picking up white while I work my way down the canvas. You can go all the way to the bottom if you want. We're going to be painting in the rest of the bottom with white for our snow. I just didn't want to miss any spots. And see that nice? It almost looks cloudy. And I'm going to come here. And while I'm doing this, I'm just going to take my brush, and I'm not even full coverage, but just so it looks like I painted on the edges, I'm going to paint some on the edges. It's still not full coverage, but it doesn't look like I forgot them. It looks like I intentionally painted them because it's a mixture, the same as it is on the canvas. I'm going to pick up a little bit more blue and make my top up here a little bit darker in the corners, on the very top, and then around to the sides. Ordinarily, if you've been following me on my YouTube channel, Teresa's Spot for Step-by-Step Beginner Art, I usually take my tracer and trace on before I do my background, and then we paint around it. With this painting, I am doing my background first, obviously. Then we're going to let it dry, and then we're going to go in and trace in our tracer. I'm going to grab my heat gun and get this dried off for you. I'm just trying to make the bottom a little whiter, adding in a little bit more white and blending it down here. Now, don't get all jammed up about your background. It doesn't have to be perfect. It is not the focal point of this picture. Our gnome is going to be the focal point of this picture. So if you're like, mine doesn't look like yours, It's okay. Don't fret. This is not the focal point. You want to have coverage. You want to have blending. You want to have different shades of blue. And if you were to use a flat brush, you're going to have a very different look, but your background is going to be beautiful nonetheless. So don't worry about that. I am going to grab my heater and I'm going to get this dry. Okay, now that my background is dry, I have out the rest of my palette. I have a dark green and a light green, a little bit of yellow, some red, and some black. I'm going to grab my tracer. I'm going to eyeball it as best I can. Want these up there in the corners. If I have to make them a little longer, I will. Okay. I'm going to get a little piece of tape. So I'm going to tape this around here. I'm going to grab a piece of graphite paper. And as you can see, I've used this a few hundred times and it still works. I'm going to slide it under here between my canvas and my tracer. Lay it down. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start tracing in my gnome. If you wanted to hand draw this, go right ahead. I don't draw, I paint. They are absolutely two different skills, and they are people who are either fortunate enough to be able to do both or practice long and hard to be able to do both. I find it simple to just get a tracer and just trace it on. I'm not going to do my greenery. I'm going to put my greenery in by hand. You can put your stems in, because even if I were to trace the greenery up in the corners, I would only trace in the stems. I would not trace in every little pine needle. I'm also not going to trace in the snowflakes. There's no need to trace in the snowflakes for a few reasons. You can put them wherever you want. And there may be something that you want to hide when you're done, and you're going to put a snowflake someplace else besides where it is on the tracer. And that is totally okay. This is a pretty fancy lamp. If you wanted to make yours a little less swirly, you can make a little square lamp. Totally up to you. And I think I have everything on here, so I'm just going to lift him up. Hat, nose, beard, hands, lamp. Okay, let's move this out of the way. Okay, get rid of this and get rid of that. So, and I don't need my mop brush anymore. I'm just going to wet it a little bit and leave it lay here so it's not getting in the way, because I'm done with that. Okay, I have out about a 1/2 inch flat brush. I think that's good to say. The first thing I'm going to do is put out some fresh white, because I contaminated all my white with that blue before. There we go. I'm going to load my brush with green, and when I load my brush, I put a little bit of pressure on it. I want the paint to get up into the fibers, and I'm just going to pick up a little bit of white in the corner of my brush. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint in the brim of the hat. Now, if you wanted to use a small round brush for this, if you wanted to use a smaller flat brush for this, you can. It is totally up to you. I wouldn't say use a tiny, tiny brush, because then what happens is you get way too many brush strokes. But if you can do this successfully with a smaller brush, go right ahead. I'm using about a 1/2 inch flat brush. Make my outside just a little bit rounded. Okay. And then I'm just going to take my brush and go right into the dark green. I'm not even going to wash it. And I'm going to start doing the top of the hat. I'm going to mix a tiny bit of red. Tiny bit. I'm just picking up the corner here, and I'm going to mix some of that red into my brown. I want this to be a dark brown, then a less dark brown. I don't want to get brown. I'm going to mix a little bit of red into my green here. So I have a nice dark green, a less dark green, and a light green. And I'm going to come up here and I'm just going to start base coating in my hat. Now see how much darker that is on the sides where I added a little bit of red. Just a tiny bit. I just put the corner of my brush in some red paint. And now I'm going to paint in the hat. I know we have to fill in the hat and we want to get into these corners and stuff. But once we do all that, we want our brush strokes on the hat to follow the shape of the hat. And when I say that, I mean I want my brush strokes to go curvy and go up the hat. So for now on this side, I'm outlining, I'm following my trace, I'm coming down and around. But when I go to fill in, I want my brush strokes to be rounded with the hat. Okay? And then if you see along this side, my paint is much darker where I used a little bit of that red and made that really, really nice deep dark forest green. Then in the medium. Making a nice point on my brush. And I'm just coming up here from the point on the hat and filling in the rest. And then I just want to make sure, I want a little bit more of this dark one coming down the sides. And then I'm just going to make sure that my strokes in my hat go a little curvy like that. Okay? I'm going to switch to a little bit of a smaller brush. I have a medium round here. I'm going to twirl it in my paint so I get a point on it. And I'm going to do my mittens. Oh, get this tape out of there. I don't need that. If you, again, need a smaller brush for this, go right ahead. Just remember, just don't want to use a tiny brush and have all kinds of brush lines. Okay. And then I'm going to wash that brush. Give it a little rinse. I'm going to get out a little bit of brown, or maybe some of this fawn color, just a little bit. I'm going to do his nose. His nose could be any shade of 100 different colors, so I'm not going to get too hung up in it. I just put out a little bit of tan, fawn, and some white, and I'm just going to paint in the oval that is his nose right here. If you want your hat over your nose or your nose over your hat, it's up to you. Okay? And again, I'm going to wash my brush. Now I'm going to paint in his little outfit. I'm going to do the same thing with the red that I did with the green. Move some red out here. Tiny, tiny bit of green. Tiny bit. And I'm going to mix it into my red. I'm using Tuscan red. It's more of a deep red than a bright red, like an engine red or a fire truck engine red. But I'm putting a little bit of green in it nonetheless to make it that much deeper. Okay, I'm going to roll my brush. And I'm going to work on his little outfit here. I like to come in and outline first, and then I will fill in. If you notice, I work on a Lazy Susie. It helps me stay a little bit neater, keep my hands out of my paint, and then this way I can turn my surface any way I need to while I'm painting. And I'm just using this dark red here to paint in the whole bottom down here. We're going to go back and highlight later. This is just the beginning of our painting. We're doing all the base coating. We're doing all the color blocking. There's going to be a lot more to our painting as we continue. So 2 things. We don't judge it. And we don't get jammed up if we make a mistake, because we will be able to fix whatever it is as we go on. We paint in layers from the bottom layer up, and we can fix it. And if we can't fix it, we can hide it with a leaf, a branch, a snowflake, and it's all good. My art is meant to inspire and create joy in your life, not to get you into a museum. Art started for me as therapy, and I share the feelings I get when I paint with others. Okay? So just color blocking in as we go along. And I'm going to wash my brush. Give it a good rinse. And then come over here and dry it on my towel. When I dry my brush, I actually use my towel and I will give it a squeeze. You don't want, when you turn your brush up and go to paint, that there is water up here in the metal, and you do that and it drips everywhere. It's not good. Okay, I can go back to my little flat brush, or I can stick with this medium round brush, and I'm going to start painting in the base coat of the beard. Make sure your red is nice and dry. When I paint around the nose, again, I'm outlining. And none of this down here has to be perfect, and I'm going to show you why when we get to it. And now I'm just putting in strokes, little strokes. I am creating texture with my brush. And I am going to, oh, see, right there. That's where we're going to put a snowflake later. These little brush strokes, although they are all white, it's creating texture on our canvas. And that's another reason why I do the outfit first, because my red is dry now, and I want to pull some of these little lines down over his outfit. I don't want a solid line down here, okay? I want a nice rough edge. If you need to fix your nose, you can. And right now, I'm just pulling in a little bit of these lines. Now I'm going to move some of this out of the way, moving over some of my white. And I'm just going to pick up the tiniest bit of black. Look at that. And mix it in here to get some gray. All right. And I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to start adding little gray strokes. You don't want to cover up all the white. You do want your white to be still a little wet. And I'm just pulling in little tiny, flicking, not using my pointer, flicking with my wrist, little tiny gray strokes. I'm going to pick up a little bit more black, tiny bit, mix that into the gray that I started over here, twist my brush, and then come back with the third row. I'm making these a little bit curvy. You see that these have a little bit of a curve to them, some to the left, some to the right. You don't want this to be solid. You want this wispy, little tiny curves. If you get carried away, wait for it to dry, pick up some white and add some white back in. But I think that is good. And you can make your beard darker. You can make your beard ginger if you want. It's your gnome, your way. I just made a little bit darker again, and I'm just pulling in a few little darker strands just to give a little bit more texture and difference. Okay. I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to pick up white again, and we're going to paint in the ornament. Now this ornament is ultimately going to be red, but I want it to be a nice red that pops. So I'm putting in a base coat of white. I could even, and this is going to sound odd, have put in a base coat of light green. So we're going to leave that for now. Then I'm going to come and I'm going to add in the fur cuffs. And the fur along the bottom. Put a little bit of a curve. And there we go. Now I think I'm going to switch to my liner brush because we're going to do his shoes and we're going to do the lantern. I'm going to wet my liner brush a little bit because I want all my fibers to come together. I'm going to pick up my black. I'm going to come over here and we're going to do his feet. That's one. That's two. And then I'm going to fill them in. Okay. I'm going to roll my liner brush. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do the lantern. So the first part of the lantern has the little handle on it. Okay. The next part of the lantern, I'm going to use my back of the brush for that. There's a little bit of ball on the top. And then it comes down. Then the outside of the lantern is pretty thick. So I'm just doing my liner brush and I'm drawing in a square. Okay. Then I'm going to add the base. And we'll let that dry a little bit. Okay. While that's drying, I'm going to go back to my little medium round brush. We could have used this one before. And I'm going to paint in, got a little black there. I'm going to paint in my snow. I could have done this and probably should have done this before when I was doing in my I could have done this before when I was doing the pom-pom. And I'm just coming in. And you don't want this to be an even line. You want it to be a little hilly. The line I drew is even because I traced it. But when you come in here to do the snow, you want it to be a little hilly. And I'm just swishing white in all around here. I'm going to do my sides. Then I'm going to just pick up a little bit of gray, and I want to make some shadows down here. Tiny bit of gray from what I mixed before. And just some messy shadows. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit more black. I'm going to make my gray a little bit darker. And I want to put in shadows under his feet where he's standing. And I'm pretty much just scrubbing my brush across the bottom here. I have my brush on its side, and I'm just going left to right. My brush is practically like on a 45, and I'm just adding a little bit of shadow under him. Okay? And I'm going to wash my brush and go back to my liner brush. 3 is usually the max number of brushes that I use. This was a little unique, this project, because this project called for the mop brush to do the background. And see how I've gotten paint around where I don't want it? I'm going to pick up a little bit of water. I'm wetting this black paint a little bit. I'm going to get this paper towel. I'm going to lighten it up. Not yet. Later on, I'm going to put a snowflake over that. Okay? I move around when I paint. So as one part is drying, I can work on a different part. When that part is drying, I can go back to a different part. So I tend to paint a little quick. I paint fast, but I also paint in a certain way that I can keep moving around my design. First thing I'm going to do now, I'm going to use the back of my little liner brush. I'm going to stick it in some yellow. And then I'm going to stick it in some white. And I'm going to put a little glow in our lantern. Okay? And I'm just going to leave that like that for now. Now we're going to go to our greenery. I'm going to load my liner brush with green. See how I'm twisting it between my thumb and forefinger? I want my liner brush to have a nice point on it. And then I'm just going to come over here. I'm going to swipe through the black a little bit. I'm going to come up to the top of my painting. And you could have traced these in. It's totally up to you. And I'm going to just pull down one line, another line, and then another line for my pine needles. Okay, again, I'm going to turn my brush between my thumb and forefinger. I'm going to swipe it over here in the black. I'm going to come up to this corner, and I'm going to do one line, and then another line. Now I'm going to turn it upside down. I'm going to load my brush with the green. I'm going to start at the tip, and I'm going to start putting in these little pine needles. I'm taking my brush, I'm lining it up on the stem, and I'm pushing a little bit frontwards and forward. And the same thing on the other side. I'm going a little bit to the front and a little forward. And I'm going to add pine needles down every one of these stems. Maybe you want to get a little scrap paper and practice first. Having a light touch. And if you see, I only do about 3 needles before I go in and get more paint. You're not going to be able to do a whole stem. You may not even be able to do 3. You may only be able to do 2. It depends on your brush. Honestly, brushes hold different amounts of paint depending on the quality of the brush and the bristles, whether they're natural or synthetic. I'm just adding in pine needles down every side of every stem. They go on an angle and on a little bit of a curve. They're almost like upside down V's. And even where my two stems meet, and you're not going to see a lot of them, I still go in there and overlap the pine needles. Now we're going to do the same thing. I'm just going to wipe off my brush. I'm not even going to clean it. I'm just going to come into my light paint now. I'm twirling it over here on the right between my thumb and forefinger. And I'm going to do the same thing. But now I'm just going to start adding in a little bit of these white ones. I mean, these lighter ones, these light green ones. If your paint is too thick from sitting out, pick up a tiny, tiny bit of water. My paint has thickened up, but not enough for me to put in water yet. But you want your strokes to not look dry, and you want your brush to move. I'm flicking, and my strokes are a little bit thinner on the ends than they are at the beginnings. And the same thing over here. I'm even going to go back at the end and put in some white ones. Again, they overlap here, but I'm still going to add in some of those green leaves, or those green pine needles, I guess is more what they are. Okay, and I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to go back into my red, and I'm going to paint in my ornament. You have to make sure that your white is nice and dry, or you will end up with pink. Okay, now I'm going to pick up a little bit of this green. I'll put it over here with a little bit of my red, making a really, really deeper red, just a little bit, just enough, because I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a little bit of shade with this darker red just next to where the ornament is next to my gnome. That's it. It's a little bit of shade in there. And I'm going to wash my brush. I'm going to go back to this gray that I made. And I'm going to put the ornament topper. Wipe off my brush. Get some black. And put our hook. You don't want the hook to go right through it. It's coming from around the back. It hooks on his hat. And then it goes down. The same thing with the lantern. The lantern comes up the back. He's holding it in his mitt and comes around. Okay? These little details make a difference. I'm going to switch, and it doesn't matter what brush you use. I'm going to put some berries up in our pine needles. And I do that with the back of my brush, so I wanted a bigger handle. I'm going to dip in my red paint. And I'm going to put in some clusters of berries. And you can put as many of these as you want. These down here, I'm going to do a little bit smaller. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm using the back of my brush to draw these little tiny circles. I feel like it's easier to control the back of the brush than it is to control the bristles. And you can make a tight little circle much easier this way. And then I'm just going to put down here a cluster, or a couple of clusters of 3 down there. Maybe I'll put another couple up here. There we go. Okay. I'm going to go back to my liner brush now. Wipe it off. And I'm going to start putting in a little bit of detail. I'm going to come to my white, and I'm going to put some detail, a nice highlight on the ornament. I'm going to put a highlight on each of the boots. I'm going to put some highlight on the lantern and the light in the lantern. I'm going to put a piece of highlight, a stroke right there on the tip of his nose. I'm going to add some down here to each of his sleeves and the bottom of his outfit. I'm going to put a little bit over here at the edge of his hat. I'm going to add a little bit, not too much, up here with my pine needles. Not too much, just a few white highlights here and there. And now we're going to work on our hat. Now you can leave your hat the way it is. You can put a design in your hat like I'm going to. Totally up to you. I'm just going to start adding in a few stripes and a few patterns. I'm going to make some of the stripes thicker, some of them thinner, and I'm just going to work my way around the hat. Okay? You can leave the hat blank. You can just make stripes on your hat. You can make big giant polka dots on your hat. Your hat, your way. Just remember when you do the segments, you want them to curve. I curved those the wrong way. You want them to curve. Okay? Around the hat. I might go back over that with green. And you can put in X's, O's, dots. I like the pattern. It makes it look like a bit of an ugly sweater. I'm just doodling basically, but between every segment, I want there to be, this is going to do big dots, a curved line. And I want this to be a thick white line. So I'm just going to use my liner brush. I could switch brushes if I wanted to, but I'm just going to use my liner brush and just make it a little bit wider down here. Okay. Then I'm going to do some more dots. And these are a little bit more random than the ones above where I use the back of the brush. And as I come down here too, my patterns are starting to get a little bit bigger. I'm just putting some X's in here. You can follow the example. You can follow what I'm doing here. You can do neither. It's totally up to you. And there's my hat. I'm going to grab my little flat brush to show you how easily we're going to fix this part up here. Get some of my green. And I'm just going to paint over this here with some green. It is just paint, and you can fix anything. Okay, and I'll go back in and I'll add some back into that with the white. I'm going to clean my brush. Now I want to come back down to my lamp. Very, very thin black. I have my liner brush. I'm twirling it here between my thumb and my forefinger. And we're going to add the glass part into our lantern. Okay. You can even take your finger. I'm just going to get a little bit of a little bit of yellow. You can take your finger and smush it out here like this to get your lamp glowing a little bit more. Totally up to you. I'm just going to go over the black so I have the nice glow to the back. Okay. Here's my brush. I'll go back to my white so I can finish my hat. That's it. Put a little bit of highlight over my nose here. All right. Now, there are 3 ways that we can make snow. I can dip in my brush. And if you see, the first thing I'm doing is just strategically putting some dots where I splattered paint before. That's why I said don't get jammed up about your background or a mistake, because it doesn't matter. Okay? That's one way of doing snow. Another way of doing snow is to take your liner brush and make these snowflakes. And the snowflakes are an X and then a cross. And then you can put little dots on each tab. They can also be a cross and an X, and then have these little V's at the end of each tail. And you see I'm only putting 1 on the shorter ones, and I'm putting 2 on the longer ones. But they're snowflakes, you guys, remember? No 2 snowflakes are ever alike. So you can do however you want. You can wait till your painting is completely dry and use a stencil. Totally up to you. You can skip the snowflakes altogether. You can do them in all dippity dots like I did to begin with. It's totally up to you. And I have a third way to show you how to do a little bit of snow as well. This way tends to be a little messy, but your art, your way. And you can make this as full or as sparse as you want. Now this time, this snowflake's a little bigger, so I'm putting these on every, I don't know, what would you call it? Arm, limb, stem, whatever. Okay? I do want to go back now that my berries are a little bit dry and add a white highlight to each berry. These little ones, I'm just putting a dot. The larger ones, I'm putting a little bit of a comma stroke. I'm even going to add a little bit of white to my stems. I add a little bit on the hat and a little bit to the hook as well. Okay. And then the third way to add snow, I'm going to show you guys right now. Clean off my brush. Let's move that over here. I'm going to pick up a little bit of white paint. And use this brush because this brush is clean. And I'm going to get a piece of scrap and I'm going to tap. One big tap over there, and then I'm going to come to my painting and I'm going to tap. And now I'm getting all these faint little splatters on my painting. It's a little bit in the background. I can add a little bit more. Let me get some more paint. The first tap I like to do over here to get out all the mess. And then I come back to my painting. Now this will get everywhere. So you have stuff around. You have to be careful. And that'll do it. So let me turn you guys around. And here we are. There's our little Christmas gnome. Thank you for joining me. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and follow the playlist that is in the description. And I will see you next time.